right. Welcome to Living in the Past, where two middle-aged dudes relive their past by enjoying the pop culture of their youth. In this episode, we are exploring the 1993 film The Fugitive. And as always, it's better to escape from a prison train or bus with a buddy. And on this episode, we have the long-awaited return of Carl. Carl,
Yes.
It's good to have you back.
Oh, to heck with you, Jeremy. I'm getting out of here on my own. You're on the bus. Good luck. No, I'm just kidding.
This is the first episode of our fourth year doing the show. I don't know about you. I can't believe we're starting the fourth year of Living in the Past.
Yeah. Time flies. It's been so much other stuff going on, and there's so much in the past that we get. It's glad we're doing it. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised we're still here. We started with Red Dawn, the 1984 film, and our patrons have just kind of helped steer the ship. And they said, "Hey, can you guys please do each year do the 40th anniversary films and the 30th anniversary films?" So this year, obviously, we've been doing 1993 and 1983 films respectively. This is a 1993 film. It's hard to believe that The Fugitive is having a 30th anniversary. For those of you that are like, wait, what was The Fugitive? I mean, it's a Harrison Ford film. It's a good Harrison Ford film, and it's a thriller, and it's almost something you don't see anymore. We were talking about this when I was watching it, which is when my family, my wife came in, my son came in, we were watching the film, and my wife just commented like, there's none of these big films like this anymore that are sort of for grown-ups specifically. And younger people obviously can enjoy it, but it just felt like, oh yeah, this is a grown-up thriller adventure film, and Harrison Ford's in it, Tommy Lee Jones is in it. Harrison Ford's wrongly accused of the murder of his wife, and he is convicted to be put to death, and through a series of events he's able to escape, go on the run, and try to prove his innocence. Carl, when was the first time? Did you see this in the theater for the first time?
I did. It was, and it was 93, and I was like curious because I remembered. I was like, it was the last time I went and did something in Birmingham with friends, college friends, fraternity brothers. And I was like, I think I was leaving town, and I think it was to go to Tuscaloosa. And so I checked the date, and it was 93. I was like, it's either Tuscaloosa or Washington. Those were 3 years apart. So when I looked at it, it was like, August of 93. And I had, I was leaving to go to Tuscaloosa in August to where I eventually met Jeremy. And we were only about, 20 years from, being, maybe running into Sela Ward on campus or something. So don't barely miss that. So
yeah, for those of you that don't know, Ward, who plays Harrison Ford's wife that gets murdered, she was a student at the University of Alabama, and I think she was even homecoming queen, sort of like a legend
cheerleader
for
also.
Cheerleader, homecoming queen, sort of like the perfect female for the University of Alabama, and she's kind of a legendary kind of pop cultural figure at the University of Alabama. She's great. I mean, in the little that she has in the film, I've always liked stuff she's been in, but this is really a vehicle for 2 stars, and it's the proven star power of Harrison Ford, but also Tommy Lee Jones. We'll talk about him in a minute. They're both incredible. In this film, I was doing a little bit of research, Carl. This is surprising to me. This was the third highest grossing film of the year. Of course, you have Jurassic Park as the number 1 film. I remember the number 2 film in terms of gross receipts in the theater being a big box office hit, but I didn't realize Miss Doubtfire made $500 million. It made almost $500 million worldwide. Wow. In 1993, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's just, so Mrs. Doubtfire, you have all these star-powered films because number 3 is The Fugitive, and number 4 is Schindler's List, star power being the director, Spielberg. It was an incredible year for him. And then number 5 is The Firm. And so 1 through 5, Jurassic Park, Doubtfire, Fugitive, Schindler's List, and The Firm. It's weird to think that when you look at the top 5, there are, of the top grossing films, there's no comic book movies.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a science fiction film,
Right.
Jurassic Park, but you have a
Mm-hmm.
comedy,
Mm-hmm.
suspense thriller, a Holocaust war film,
Yeah.
and
Very
sort of
serious.
another. I would put The Firm in sort of that thriller
Yeah.
drama type category as well in terms of genre.
Mm-hmm.
What a different time for movies, don't you think? Like, I don't the top 5 films this year, I don't know what they are at the moment. I think it's I mean, obviously Barbie is there, Oppenheimer's there, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what fills out the rest of the list. But it just feels like such a different time. Do they make movies like this anymore? Do they make movies like The Fugitive anymore, Carl?
No, definitely not as often as they have,
Right,
and maybe they're showing up on things like Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. But
right,
to me, the theater, like you said, and I love science fiction and comic book movies, but it seems like that's about all that kind of brings people out anymore.
yeah,
And
yeah,
almost like going to the theater, I just like going to the movie theater for whatever. If I like the movie, like we did not, we did one time a few good men, another
yeah,
really good
yeah,
movie. They don't make like that anymore. Um,
right,
and those movies, I think people can say, well, I can sit at home and watch those just as easy because I'm going to go for the giant screen and the sound for something that's going to have explosions and great special effects or something. So I don't
right,
know if
right.
that's what it is or what, but they don't seem to. And I think maybe COVID, I don't, I kind of was looking ahead to some things that are coming out, seem to be coming out next year. And it seems like we've still sort of not gotten back to doing movies like we did before COVID. And especially
Right.
with the writer strike, had just kind of maybe they were starting to get there. The writer strike happened, so maybe we will. I know there is some fatigue of here, comic book movies and that sort of thing. So maybe we'll get
Right.
back to some things like this. But I think there's definitely a place for them, and I definitely in this movie is a very good movie that it stands the test of time too. I think my kids could watch it and be like, that's a good movie.
Yeah, Sam is my son is my youngest kid. He's 12. Just had his
Hmm.
12th birthday, and he, in the when you have that early moment in the fugitive, it moves really quick. It
Hmm.
is the murder has happened when the movie starts, and um, it rapidly progresses to where you have the big train bus accident, and
Hmm.
when that happened and Harrison Ford's running and the train's like, by the way, that was a real train they wrecked. And you
Mm.
can, I read somewhere that you can even go, it was filmed up around the Smoky Mountains. And I believe, I think it was the Tennessee side of that region, but it could
Hmm.
have been North Carolina. Regardless, you can find the wreckage still there. There's still some wreckage that was not taken away, and you can see the wreckage of the fugitive. But when that was happening, my son Sam was like, "This is awesome!" Like, he was so into it. He was like, "This is great," and
Yeah.
and I just think what he is normally being exposed to is almost fantastical characters in like
Right.
fantasy or superhero comic book, like that's sort of what he's ingesting. And
Hmm.
so whenever he watches something that's a little more grounded, I mean, there's even a fist fight at the end of the movie, and no one is doing like Jason Bourne kung fu on each other, right? It's just like
Right.
kind of punching each other as best they can. It's very,
It's not
it's
Indiana Jones doing that
yeah,
fight.
it's not like we're watching The Raid,
Yeah.
where they're like wiping each
It's
other
two
out.
doctors. It's two doctors.
It's two surgeons
Like, I
just
don't want to
going
hurt
at it.
my squash arm. I'm gonna hit you with my other arm.
So I don't know. I just really, it was fun to sit down and watch the film, and I
Hmm.
just appreciated that time where yes, there was a lot of money put into it. And I wonder if Hollywood, and maybe we're seeing signs of that, while there was a big budget for Barbie and Oppenheimer, both. There is, I think, a time coming. It's going to take a while because I think the actors strike and the writer's strike is going to delay a lot of things from getting made and put out there. But
Hmm.
I think we might see some kind of mid-tier budgeted films coming out that do feed into like what older audiences want. I even was talking to my film students. And so these are 17-year-old students, and we were talking about film theory. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the students made a comment like, I don't even care what Disney releases anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not that far from Disneyland. I mean, we're here in California. This is like Disney is all over the place in terms of just being in the minds of young people
Right.
in this region.
Mm-hmm.
And just when that student made that comment, we were in a kind of a discussion group. So there's about 13, 14 of us. I would say almost every single student agreed. I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
No one, at least no one pushed back like, yeah, I see everything Disney. They're all like, it's all the same. It's all like not interesting to us anymore. But they
Yeah.
all went and saw Barbie, and almost all of them saw Oppenheimer, which is
Mm-hmm.
really surprising. So I do wonder if like things are going to start shifting. You're going to start to see these mid tier budgeted films, like budgets. It sounds astronomical, but not compared to like 200 to 300 million that we're
Right.
seeing, but like a $40 million film, a thirty
Mm-hmm.
million dollar film, maybe a $50 million film, and kind of tailoring and catering to just different audiences, but also
Mm-hmm.
just what people want to see. It seems like we're getting tired of that. Do you feel that way? What about your own kids? Are they still engaged in like kind of the marvelization of cinema? Or are they kind of backing away from that? What are you noticing?
Well, my kids don't, and we don't even have a great setup. Like, I've been in people's houses that it's like it's a theater in their house.
Yeah, right.
Um, and we don't even have a great setup, so they don't particularly care about going to the movie theater.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're like, we'd rather watch it at home whenever it comes out. And honestly, my son, um, we've went to all the Marvel movies since they were a kid, and that's kind of a family thing we do together
Right.
because
Right.
a lot of the times it's hard to find something everybody agrees on. And as far as that goes, my wife and I go very regular to the movies by ourselves together, but it's almost like my son would sit. He doesn't. It's attention span or whatever it is.
Right.
He can't really sit for like a scripted
Right. Right.
show for of any length of time, and so I don't know what it's going to take as far as that. People like my son to say, yeah, I want to go to the theater on the more. Now, some friends of his went to see Five Nights at Freddy, and he went.
Yeah.
And one girl was talking about how much she liked that movie, and she'd seen it 5 times. So I don't know if my son's typical for people his age or
Yeah.
not, but it just seems like going to the theater itself, it's like they almost want some of these YouTube experiences that can be
Right.
short, and it's maybe just somebody talking who's a regular person instead of people acting. Which,
Yeah.
I can see those things and enjoy them, but I prefer something that is well produced and thought out and written
Exactly.
ahead of time.
Yeah. It does feel like we're in this new shifting phase. The patrons we just did a podcast for our patrons, and it's really about, is cinema dead? Like the cinema theater going experience, is it dead? And where do we go moving forward? And when you see a movie like The Fugitive, you're like, you remember what it was like. This was a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. This film, made 368 million globally in 1993. That was a huge hit. One of Harrison Ford's most successful films. What's interesting just about the success of that, and thinking back to that time period, it was sort of a remake, or at least it
Mm-hmm.
was based on this TV series that ran in the 1960s, early 60s to mid late 60s. Did you ever watch the show? Because I had watched a few episodes, but I wasn't super familiar with it. Were you?
Mm-hmm. No, I was not. Now I grew up without cable,
Yeah, yeah,
so I wasn't alive in the '60s. I'll tell you
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
regardless of how I look, but they I had sort of heard about it. I think I heard a teacher one time when I was in school reference a one-armed man type thing, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
um, so I was like, okay, they kind of explained it, and I think once I was in someone's house and it was maybe on like an old black and white
Mhm.
show or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
and so I knew of it, but I never I've never watched a full episode. I've seen
yeah.
maybe bits and pieces, but I just basically knew people would sort of reference this guy that was falsely accused and had to
You're right.
run around the country trying to find the person who actually killed his wife.
Yeah,
That's all I
yeah. I
know.
mean, it ran for I think 4 seasons, maybe 5 seasons. It was
I was just looking it up. It says 4 seasons, and I
yeah,
almost want to say I had to look it up. I almost want to say it was maybe on the list of shows that actually had a good final episode. So I think
yeah.
maybe they did wrap it up. A
They
lot of times
did.
you get a show like that,
Yeah.
and they have, and then they get canceled. It's like, well, we never really wrapped it up, but oh well.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
I think it was something that came full circle.
yeah, it got wrapped up and it was pretty popular. I mean, I guess in 1993 I was a freshman or sophomore in college and
Mm,
I was pretty familiar with like it was still enough in the pop culture, ether that I was like, "Oh yeah, I
right.
know that show, The Fugitive, the guy trying to, prove his innocence,
Hmm.
blah blah blah." But when I went in and sat in the theater, I wasn't that familiar. Like I didn't know if they were paying homage to anything in the show. I was
Yeah.
just watching it as a fan of really what drew me was Harrison Ford. I was a huge fan of his,
Hmm.
and the story concept was really compelling to me. I don't know why I like these like wrongfully accused, um, trying to prove
Hmm.
your innocence, but I think it's a sense that we all have of like we want to see justice done, and when someone's
Right.
wronged, we want them to be proven, right. I don't know why that's so compelling. Did you find that story compelling to you at all, or what was sort of the draw for you to The Fugitive?
Well, yeah, Harrison Ford, especially at that time, was a big star, and that was probably my favorite actor as
Hmm.
a you know from a kid on
Yeah.
for the longest time. So he's especially
Yeah, yeah.
still that way in the '90s at the very least. So anything he was in, I was probably going to go see. Um, but yeah, the wrongfully accused type genre, you got like Double Jeopardy, I think, with Ashley Judd and different. There's
Right,
lots of them
right.
too. Those are interesting because it is if when the system's against you, how do you prove your innocence?
Mm,
You're taking
mhm.
the whole time you're taking a risk of possibly being killed because you're on the run, and if at some point you come across somebody and they think you're dangerous, they may kill you before they arrest you or whatever, or getting at the very least getting rearrested and never actually completing it. So how do you do that? What would I
Yeah,
do in that situation? Would I
right,
sit
right,
there and go, I guess I'm just here in prison, I'm not going to do anything about it, or would I try to you
right.
know escape and be out there and clear my name?
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to think about.
Yeah, it was a really good vehicle for Harrison Ford, I think. Like, just this
Hmm.
film was a like, kind of almost a perfect choice for him as he was sort of making this shift.
Hmm.
I mean, he did still make some action. I mean, he makes Air Force One in like a few years after this. So, like, he's still doing kind of the action thing, but
Hmm.
he is doing other types of projects as well. And the 90s are interesting because he's leaving Indiana Jones in 1989 and this is his 90s set of films. He has Presumed Innocent, Regarding Henry, Patriot Games, which is sort of his new thing, I guess, because he does
Hmm.
Patriot Games in '92, then The Fugitive, then goes back to the Jack Ryan universe that Tom
Hmm.
Clancy was writing, and he did Clear and Present Danger in '94. He did Sabrina, The Devil's Own, Air Force One, 6 Days and 7 Nights, and then he rounds out the '90s with Random Hearts. Looking at the list, I really have a soft spot for Patriot Games and Clear and
Hmm.
Present Danger, but I think
Hmm.
my two favorite films are The Fugitive and the really underrated Presumed Innocent. And
Hmm.
I love those movies so much. And but it has been a while since I've seen The Fugitive, and
Right.
I was kind of blown away by how well crafted it was. It's just a good '90s movie, and
Hmm.
I don't know many kids because I deal with teenagers every day in my job, and if I was to say, "Have you seen The Fugitive?" I in my film class, so these are students who love movies and want to learn how to make movies. There's a handful that probably have seen it, like maybe two or
Hmm.
three. It's not in the it's not one of those classics, I don't
Right.
think, but it's so good. I wish it was. It's one of those, like, just competently edited and made films that I was it's been a while since I've seen it, but I'm glad
Mhm.
we're doing it for this episode.
Yeah.
It's really good stuff. Andrew Davis was the director. He directed The Fugitive, but he also did Under Siege with with the great Steven Seagal,
Yeah.
and he
Nick, I
is
mean, no, ah, sorry, on the tip of my tongue. He played Bear. He played
oh yeah, Gary Busey
Gary Busey. Yeah, yeah.
is awesome. Yeah, um, that movie, and it was
And
filmed
even
on the
yeah,
USS Alabama, so there's an Alabama connection down in
yeah.
Mobile. So, but then he made Chain Reaction with Keanu Reeves, A Perfect Murder with Michael Douglas, and then he made the Disney movie Holes, and
Mhm.
those are some of his big films. And I really think he did a good job. But I think if you think of The Fugitive, you not only just think of Harrison Ford, but you think of a pretty iconic performance by Tommy Lee Jones. I think they're what make the movie work. And I'm curious, what did you think of Tommy Lee Jones? Did you like him as, this U.S. Marshal Gerard, or did you just find Harrison Ford more compelling? Like what was your response like to that character of, U.S. Marshal Sam Gerard?
Well, before I sat down and rewatched it, I actually was remember thinking that he actually sort of took over the movie. Even though this is a Harrison Ford movie, his personality sort of more dominated the movie than Harrison Ford. You remember lines from him more than you do from Harrison
Right.
Ford. You remember we're going to check every warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, dog house,
Yeah.
an outhouse. You remember those things, and
Right.
so he and actually, I kind of went in expecting, yeah, he does a lot more than he gets billing for. I guess he's second
Right.
billed, but he's almost more equally billed. But and for the most part, it's like I came across with that. I guess there was one part where he's, he's, you like him because he's competent. He's very good at what he does. He's smart. He's a little sarcastic about things.
Right.
He'll sort of just let people kind of give him a little bit of rope to hang themselves with, and then kind of call him out on it. But he also cares about the people on his team. But there's a point where when Harrison Ford when Kimball goes over the dam
Mm-hmm.
and the bombastic, hey, we're going to do this, and him bossing people around. At that point, he's asking, I want this water turned off, and I want dogs on each side of the thing. And it's like, hey, why is
Yeah.
this water not turned off yet? I'm like,
Right.
it's the
Right.
dam. It's like, it's not, you don't have that little plumber tool. You go out to the little main and you
Yeah.
whoop,
Just turn it.
just go whoop. All right, I just need a wrench or something. It's like that probably takes some
Yeah.
time, So he was like the rest of the movie. He's like, I really liked his performance in that part. I was like, okay, he's a
Right.
little too over the top on that part of it right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But but no, he was a very big part of the movie that you remember. And
Yeah.
Harrison Ford did more of the emotional stuff. Like Tommy Lee Jones was to a degree, comic relief, a little more lighthearted. There was serious stuff that he did, but
Right. Right. Right.
when you go back to the beginning, you talk about the murder happens at the beginning, and we're kind of flashing back and we're getting it
Right.
kind of chopped up of how the evening went. Um, when he's arrested and he's shaking and he's doing so much with his eyes, and he's answering the questions, and little by little he realizes, oh, this is pointing at me. It's like he does a lot of very good acting, but it's not the thing that you quote or remember. He's doing sort of the emotional side, and Tommy Lee Jones is doing sort of the comic side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. Tommy Lee Jones is what he does so well. So for Harrison Ford's character, he is, very much isolated. So
Mm-hmm.
he does interact with people, but he's hiding a lot. He's isolated a lot. Tommy Lee Jones is interacting with so many people throughout the film,
Right.
and that's one of the things he does so well is just these interactions. He elevates his supporting marshals, that
Mm-hmm.
supporting cast. He elevates, I think, their performances, and they all have their own little distinct things, that make them sort of stand out. And, and there are a lot of them are just like great character actors.
Right.
And, I think that's the other thing. There are so many moments where you're watching the movie, and if you're a fan of movies and watching a lot of movies from the 90s and 80s, it's like, oh, there's that person from that movie, there's that person. Like, these are
Mm-hmm.
character actors that show up in a lot of projects around this time, and they're great. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
a reason why there was a sequel made, U.S. Marshals with Tommy Lee Jones as the star, with
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes, and it's
Mm-hmm.
that movie's okay, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's that camaraderie, that chemistry that I really think Tommy Lee Jones was the driving force behind that really makes it, work. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not to say Harrison Ford's performance is bad. I think it's really good. And one of the things that struck me watching it on the rewatch just the other day is that that early scene where he's being interrogated by the police. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
in the first maybe 10, 15 minutes of the movie. I was surprised by how well Harrison Ford did it, where it kind of clicks like, oh, they
Mm-hmm.
think I'm the one that killed my wife. And just
Right.
the almost heartbreak, like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not, there's someone that
Yeah.
did this. It's not me. And, you oftentimes think of Ford when he's an actor as being very heroic, action star, Han Solo, Indiana Jones, like maybe comedic or, just kind of sarcastic.
Mm-hmm.
But this was surprisingly human in the sense of that emotional, like, range that he's showing in the early part of the movie. And that was really surprising to me because I had just forgotten that. I always remembered him being on the run, him jumping out of the, off the dam,
Yeah. Right.
the train sequence. Like, you remember
Mm-hmm.
sort of those action beats, but you forget that there's such a human element, that he is, that he's doing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's phenomenal work by Ford that I think a lot of people, have forgotten that he was so good in it. And playing off of Tommy Lee Jones, the scenes that they do have together, they have pretty good chemistry. I don't think they ever made a movie together again. Do you know if they did? I don't think they did.
Nothing I can think of.
Yeah, so it's too bad because I really think they played well off of each other,
Mm-hmm.
just throughout the film. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into three big questions. We'll be right back.
Three big questions.
Three, two, one.
All right. So there's three kind of big questions that I wanted to use to frame the film, The Fugitive, and to kind of think through and revisit it. The first question, Carl, is, we got into this a little bit, but I want to take a deeper dive.
Mm-hmm.
The Fugitive has so many just standout moments, scenes, sequences for you as a viewer, and what
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that really stand out to you, and why do you think they did stand out to you?
Well, again, before I watched it, I just kind of remember like the biggest thing that I remembered before reviewing it was the bus crash train scene. So,
Yeah.
and I almost was think, does now since effects have gotten so much better, it's like, does that hold up? And it
Right,
held
right.
up. And like you said, that was
Yeah.
even a real train crash. That part of it. Now
Yeah.
you can see the elements of,
Right.
he's not, how there's contrast. He looks different jumping off to kind of some of the stuff in the background. I
Right,
got
right.
it, but it's still good enough that it's like you're there in the moment, and it's an intense scene,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so that one kind of stands out a lot to me, as far as that goes. There's one little small one, and I don't know. You talked about all the character actors you see in the background. Do you know who Neil Flynn is? And
No,
did you
who
see
is
him?
that?
Okay. Did you ever watch the show Scrubs?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, he's the janitor on Scrubs.
Oh, that's right.
He
That's right.
played the janitor, and so he played the transit cop that gets
Yeah.
shot at the end on the L train
Right,
and
right.
dies. And he's like, "You're a cop killer, so you better turn yourself in." But the
Yeah.
funny thing, the reason I love that thing so much is on Scrubs, they actually had a scene where, if you watch Scrubs, if you haven't, okay, there's a young doctor, JD, and then there works at a hospital, and the janitor, for some reason, immediately hates him and just makes his life miserable for the whole time on the show.
Right,
And in
right.
one episode, the young Dr. JD is watching The Fugitive, sees that scene, and goes, "Hey, that's the janitor." And so they actually put the scene in Scrubs,
Oh,
and
that's great.
he like has a whole thing where he's trying to get him to admit, "Hey, that was you in that movie, right?" And the janitor kept kind of denying it, and then
Yeah.
finally admits kind of at the end, well, maybe I don't admit it because it's like I had dreams I was gonna, be a good actor, and now I'm a janitor at a hospital. So
That's
they had
awesome.
a special
I
moment, but it
forgot
was kind
all
of
about
funny.
that. I
That,
forgot all
to
about
me,
that.
I watched the movie and I'm looking for him. It's like the whole time I'm like, I like this movie. There's a lot of good stuff going on, but I'm waiting for the
Yeah.
janitor to show up. So I like that part too.
Yeah, there's of course that scene, the train hitting the bus sequence is pretty gripping. Like, and you're right. I mean, if you're really dialing in on it, it's like, oh yeah, that's he's superimposed over the wreckage, the wreckage footage. Uh, I really got into the movie a lot when it's something about being on the run and trying to evade the police and using your intelligence to outwit the authorities. I love that stuff. So I did like that early kind of cat and mouse where he goes into the hospital, he's wounded, from what happened in the wreck, and he's in this old guy's like room, and he's like eating his food, and like he's stealing his
Yeah.
clothes and shaving, and I love that stuff. I love those types of stories. I just find them really compelling. And I think there's a simplicity to them that almost any audience can follow along and get
Right.
sort of invested. If your protagonist is compelling, likable, or you feel sympathy for that person, I think you just find this deeper investment. And so when he's doing all that, you just feel so sucked in. But what I really love was when he's really starting to take control and he's back in Chicago and he's pretending to work at the hospital, and Julianne
Right.
Moore pops up, and it's early film in her career. It's probably the first time I remember seeing her. I think Big Lebowski's like maybe the next year. So I remember her from those films. That's like when I was like, who is that?
Right.
Huge crush on Julianne Moore in the 90s. And she's great, but I love those sequences with Harrison Ford juxtaposed with Tommy Lee and his team trying to figure it out. I loved how they bounced back and forth, and there's such good story choices, because one of the really good story choices is the prisoner that escaped with Harrison Ford's character.
Copeland.
And they go to his house and they have the shootout, but it was used so well. There's this other guy that escaped, and then you get to see that they use that sequence in raiding that guy's house to further explore and flesh out those characters on that team, and sort of the links that it shows you, the links that Tommy Lee Jones will go to stop these criminals and to bring them to justice. And so it actually helps us to be more afraid for Dr. Kimball, like Harrison Ford's character. Like we're more fearful for him because of those things happen. So for me, there's so many standout moments, but it's these character building moments. It's the cat and mouse stuff. Obviously the jump off the dam is like an all-timer, and it has one of the best moments, like a laugh out loud moments, where Harrison Ford says, I didn't kill my wife. And then Tommy Lee's like, I don't care. I dream of wearing, it's finals week coming up for us. I think I'm going to get that shirt one year as a teacher where it just says, I don't care.
I don't care.
Because of the excuses we get. And I just want to, that along with my mug that says students tears, like those two things together, I think I'll be living the dream. But yeah. I love that moment, and the desperation that Dr. Kimball has jumping, off the dam. It's like, what? He just did that. I'm scared of heights, so that scene gets me. The ending is fine for me, but it's the journey to that point that I really, really enjoy.
I agree.
I don't know about you. How do you feel about those things? But really, like, what are your thoughts about the ending? Did it? And we kind of have a next question that sort of deals with that. Actually, it's our last question where we talk about the antagonist. But what did you think about the the ending, did it work for you? Did you find it compelling, or is it more the journey for you that really?
Yeah, it is more the journey, but it's a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, yeah,
We've talked about how well it's crafted. It's a 2 hour and 7 minute movie, which is kind of a long movie, especially by today's standards.
yeah.
But you never felt like this movie is kind of, I was reviewing it and then I looked at it. I was kind of, once I had rewatched it, I was kind of going back to different parts. And I was like, well, that's 30 minutes into the movie. And
Right,
we've only
right.
kind of got the murder and stuff done. And all the pieces are there. It's so much that you're going on in the journey that it doesn't feel very long. And so when you get to the end, it's kind of like, unless you do some kind of epilogue about how he's still working in the hospital and stuff, it's kind of like that's just where it ends. He's been vindicated. He's safe. There's going to be some procedures to go through to kind of get that all hammered out, but right now we leave and we feel good about it. So
Right.
um,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I was thinking about it as it ended, when I was on my rewatch, and just sort of
mhm.
like, um, Dr. Kimball and Gerard like getting in the car together and driving off together, and it's like, they're like, "Hey, we're buddies now," but it's like, wait. About 30 minutes earlier, you almost tried to shoot me in the face. I would be like, if it wasn't for this bulletproof glass of the
Yeah.
jail,
Hmm.
like I would be dead. And so
Yeah.
it's funny. I kind of chuckled to myself. I'm like, I wouldn't be all buddy buddy, like, but that's just me
Yeah.
being nitpicky. Um, Obviously, The Fugitive deals with like themes of justice and innocence, the pursuit of
Right.
truth.
Hmm.
I don't, Carl, like, why do you think this quest to clear his name? I mean, this was a huge grossing film, and that storyline, that through line, clearing your name, it
Hmm.
really resonated with audiences.
Right.
Um, and like, I'm just curious what you think of that, and how the film balances like the pursuit of justice within the confines of the law. Like, what do you think about those ideas, that theme, that story through line through the movie?
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's very good, and it's something that you have to really think about, and especially as we probably at that time. Well, I would say definitely at that time until now in my life. As you get older, you start things that you have a lot of trust in. You go, you know what? You can't have that much trust in
Right,
everything that as you did when you were younger, and it's kind of like, well, it's the best system we have, but there's lots of times where people, you know they're pleading things out because they get overcharged with a bunch of stuff, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't really have a good defense. I can't afford a good defense. So all those things, it's like there's, for the most part, I'm saying that I believe the American judicial system is getting most things right, but that there is a margin of error somewhere, and how big or little that is, maybe it depend on your point of view, but it's kind of
right,
one of those things. Is like we know those mistakes happen, and so how do we get those things cleared? And we've had a
right,
lot of stuff as people get more technical with DNA, things like that and people are fighting for it. But I think those things are even done today, and the movie touches on. I think it's just people hate that. They hate when somebody
right.
is paying the price for something that they didn't do. They don't want it to
Yeah,
happen to them, but they also, I think, a lot of times feel other people like, that's not
like
right.
empathy.
So
Yeah, empathy for
yeah,
others. Yeah,
yeah,
I totally agree. Sam was like that. My little 12-year-old watching it, he looked at me, and oh, as a parent, there's moments you have
hmm,
with your kids as they're growing up where they have these realizations, and
hmm,
sometimes they learn things early, sometimes it's later it comes to them. But Sam looked at me and he was like, "Does this really happen to people?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And I told him about the Innocence Project and how,
hmm,
there's organizations that are trying to like go out and like prove the innocence of people that they believe have been wrongly convicted of crimes. And
hmm,
Sam, at that point in the film, even though I said, yeah, this is pretty dramatic, obviously, but like, yeah, stuff like that, people get convicted of, murder, and they didn't do it.
hmm.
And then I almost told him about um, the guy in prison for killing Malcolm X that wasn't there, and how he just got out recently, and there
Yeah,
was another person that was arrested that died in prison, and he was never
mm,
vindicated. And I didn't do that. I was like, we'll leave it right here for now, and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I think you're right. I think it's this idea that while there are times where our system works well, and thank God for that, there are other times where we know it doesn't. And
Hmm.
when we can like put what Dr. Kimball goes through in the film on ourselves and go, what would I do in this situation? Which is
Hmm.
sometimes the fun of the movies, right? There is this just profound empathy we feel for people that are wrongly convicted. And there's this profound, I think we just have this like need to prove innocence. And I think
Right.
once that storyline hooks us in The Fugitive, I think this is the driving force for the film. I think this is
Hmm.
what makes us like come on, Dr. Kimball, like you could do this. And we love moments where he like, you remember the scene, one of my favorite scenes in the movie where he saves the boy. He
Hmm.
looks at his x-rays, sees that he's been misdiagnosed, takes him to the right place in the hospital, diagnoses him correctly, and the boy's life is saved. And we're like, yeah, he's a hero. We're
Yeah.
just like, this is the guy. We're
Hmm.
gonna like hitch our wagon to him. And I think we have we're in this weird time in film and art. I don't want to
Hmm.
go down this road too much, but a lot of people are saying we're in this time where art is being made called this meta modern time. It's like postmodern stuff,
Hmm.
and The Fugitive has a much more like classical modernist approach to storytelling. You have the good guy, you have the bad guy, you have the search for truth. There is a
Hmm.
truth. There is this one
Right.
reality. And I think The Fugitive is, I think that's why Top Gun Maverick was so successful, is it was this very clear, like good,
Right.
bad, like this is the mission. Like, yes, we can
Right.
get behind it. And I think The Fugitive does that. We get behind this character that's trying to prove that he's innocent, and it's a fight for truth. And I think,
Hmm.
man, I don't know about you, but that idea is really, that quest is really what like is so profound. And I think we all just want that for other people. And if we were in that situation, we would want it for
Right.
ourselves,
Right.
and I think that's what makes it a classic. I really hope
Hmm.
a movie like this, we're almost done with 2023, and it's the 30th
Hmm.
anniversary, but I hope people do go find this film and rewatch it, because I think it's worth your time. I think it's worth
It
people's
is.
time.
Hmm.
Here is probably my biggest criticism,
Hmm.
and it's, does The Fugitive have a good antagonist?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if it does. I leaned at saying the weakest part of this is it really doesn't have a good antagonist.
Hmm.
And so I wonder what you think about that. Does it have a good antagonist? You might disagree, and I'm curious what you think. And then, like, when that reveal of who the true bad guy is,
Hmm.
did it really impact the story for you? Did it create more tension and for the narrative for you? Like, what are your thoughts?
Uh, to me, it's almost like the antagonist maybe really be Tommy Lee Jones
Yeah.
um and his apathy. Um, he's got a job, and he's got, in law enforcement, you can have a degree of whether or not you say, well, I'm gonna take I'm gonna arrest this person today or not. You got a little
Right.
bit of
Right. Right.
leniency on you get to make a call. But
Right.
his
Right.
on the back end of, he's the marshal. His job is, you just got to, your job is, this person has been convicted or this person is in custody. They escaped custody. They've got to come back into custody. So there's
Yeah.
no, he doesn't have to think about it. He doesn't have to give any kind of leniency. And it's when he's in that scene where he does say, I don't negotiate, you know, we didn't get into it. I kind of hit me now. That scene doesn't hold up on some levels. I mean, it's a
Right.
good scene in some things, but in other things, there's some problems, a little bit of problems with that. But
Yeah.
um, he doesn't negotiate. He doesn't. He doesn't have to think about it. He's not his job. That's lawyers. That's judges. That's police on the front end when there's a crime and we arrest at that point. But he's also a human being, and it's that thing you talked about. We all hate it when there's injustice.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not we care enough to look close enough, and he's like, I don't have to look close enough. I mean, I wouldn't want injustice, but I'm just here to arrest you. Other people will decide that. But you even see him kind of changing his mind as this movie's going on, and he's like, when he's meeting with the police again, when they're trying to, hey, we're just going to talk to you about who can we look at that Kimball may contact. But the first thing he asks them is, so why did he kill his wife?
You're right.
Which
Right.
motive is not
Right.
it's not an element of any crime. You don't have to prove motive. but you could just tell there's something in the back of his mind like, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so he's
Yeah.
he's already like, I don't care officially. That's my job to not care.
Right.
But the longer he stays in it, he can't help but start noticing things and to care. It's almost like when he first meets the sheriff's like, we don't need to do all those roadblocks. People might get in a tizzy. And he's like, no, we got to do our jobs. So it's almost like he wants to, he does care, even though others may not. So, but yeah, so I think he is the antagonist. And when we get to okay, why did this all happen? It's almost like, well, we're just going to wrap this up so we can see that Richard Kimball has been vindicated. But to me, we don't spend enough time. We're trying to figure out why his wife was killed, but we don't know it for so long that it's almost just like, we're just going to have that there. But really, Tommy Lee Jones is the person that had to have a change. He had to be dynamic. He had to go from one thing to another, or Richard Kimball would still be going back to prison.
Yeah, it's almost like that becomes almost the focus of the movie. Yes, he needs to prove his innocence, Dr. Kimball does, but also he needs to prove his innocence to a particular person, and that's, you know, Gerard. Like, he has to he has to come around to that, and
he has to get somebody who is in the bureaucracy to see it from his side. And he gets, it doesn't have, but that's who he gets.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's like, if anyone can do the flip, it's this guy. Like, he's early on, he's sort of questioning, and that's the ecosystem of the film. I mean, this is what the film is sort of existing on and feeding off of. It's not really, you know, this drug being developed and, you know, all this stuff. Like, that's where the story goes. But we're more concerned. It's interesting, when I was watching it, I was so glad that at the end, and I remember feeling this when I saw it in the theater. I think I saw it twice in the theater, and then maybe once on cable all the way through, and then I would watch the scene here and there, and then I watch it. So I haven't seen it that many times, and I always have that same feeling though when you know, the bad guy, the doctor, takes this metal thing and cracks the agent in the head, and you know, gets his gun, and I'm like, and then Tommy Lee Jones has to like get involved, and you know, I love that, like, okay, he'll know now for sure that it's not Dr. Kimball, this other guy is the bad guy. Like, that realization, it's like, it's more of a relief that he knows, that Gerard knows now that Kimball is not the bad guy that everyone's saying he is. And I think that's where the film succeeds. You know, the other stuff is, I find secondary, and you know, I don't know if that's a huge flaw of the film, because everything else is so successful in getting there. But I would say, if there is a flaw, it's that, like, and I think you're right, because they're withholding it's not the one-armed man, it's this doctor who the true antagonist is. They withhold it so long that the payoff is like, it's fine, but the real payoff is Gerard realizing that Kimball is innocent, and fighting for him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do There Can Be Only One.
There can be only one.
All right, Carl, what is the single best thing about The Fugitive? It can be a scene, a theme, a character. It could be a single shot from the film. It could be the music. What for you is the best thing about this movie?
And you've kind of touched on it as you've been narrating and leading this conversation, but the way I'll phrase it is, it's that we always feel like a fugitive when Harrison Ford is on the screen.
Right.
You know, he's never able to relax, and you feel that. It's not like we just set up that he's on the run from the law,
right?
Drop it in the middle of the movie, and then they close in on him at the end. It's like every scene he's in, like when he's going to visit the inmate, and he gets on an elevator. He sees security. Oh, I can't go through there. He goes to an elevator. Everything. Then about 12 cops get on the elevator with him, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And he's like, "I got nowhere to go." He's not Captain America. He's not battling out of the elevator like that.
Yeah.
So he's in the hospital. Julianne Moore. That he sees the bus crash. There's all kinds of ambulances, but there's police there too because it's in a big accident. So he's leaning up against the wall. He's in his apartment. They raid the people upstairs. You're like, are they coming to get him? When they actually go to get Copeland, they set it up to make you think that they're actually going to get Kimball. So it's like every moment he's on the screen, and we talked about, who carried who had the better acting in it. And it's like, as you mentioned, Harrison Ford his role in that movie is to be as unnoticeable as possible. That's what his character's got to be. So he does a great job with that as far as, and you notice it in the beginning and all kinds of things to the movie. So the more dynamic person, Tommy Lee Jones, is going to be who you remember but that'd be the nature of being a fugitive. You don't want to be remembered. So Harrison Ford does a great job with that. And the director and the writer does a great job as far as you feel that way the whole movie.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting for me. I think if you asked me when I was younger, when the movie first came out, I probably would have said Tommy Lee Jones was the best thing, that character. And of course he wins the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for the film. I think he's been nominated 4 times for the Academy Award. This is his win that he's gotten. Today it's very different, and it's Ford's performance is like phenomenal. Like I really have grown to appreciate it. But for me, the best thing about The Fugitive is really from the train accident through him getting to Chicago, like through the dam, just that cat and mouse, just stuff that happens. It's sort of what you were talking about, just like he's one step ahead, he's barely ahead, he keeps almost getting caught. But for me, it is that stretch, especially the dam sequence where he's really, you think he's going to get away. He's in the ambulance, but they track him down. He's in the tunnel, gets into the dam system, and the jumps, and then it's the continued being chased. That stuff right there is so good. And it's some of the best, like, action adventure filmmaking of that early 90s stretch. It's just phenomenal. I don't know, your thoughts?
I agree with all that. I did one little thing just as a kind of just a little tag on the end. I thought it was kind of funny. At one point, they're aerial shot, they're flying over. It's just a hotel. It's like Harrison Hotel. Yeah. And then there's an earlier scene when they're all at the train wreck. There's all these police cars and stuff. It's dark. You don't really see much, but there's a pickup truck that's got Ford written very large letters. You can really think. So I don't think those are accidents. I think they put Harrison Ford's name in there on purpose. As a little fun thing to do.
Yes. Why not? Why not? Oh man, it's such a good movie. If you guys those listening haven't seen it in a while, you might want to go back and check it out. We're excited about what we got coming on, Living in the Past. The next 2 films that we're doing in the month of December is Enter the Dragon. Jeff and I are recording that, and then we're following that up with The Gremlins as our Christmas movie for this year. If you're wanting to get access to our podcast early, you can do that on patreon.com/living the past, LIVININ the past. Not only that, but you get extra podcasts. We have a show called What You Talking About, but we also do YouTube videos. You'll get all those early. You'll get behind the scenes pictures. You'll be able to vote on the content that we're putting out. There's just a lot of cool things that you can do on Patreon and just be a part of what we're trying to do at Living in the Past. We're in this humble beginning stage, even though we're in year 4. It's unbelievable that we're starting year 4. And so just please check that out if you're interested. As always, thank you for listening and living in the past with us, and we will talk to you soon.